my 4PG friends. Today I'm going to read to you a student's 4th grade fantasy story that was done back in 2016. So now this boy is what, 8th grade, 9th grade? And it was a really good piece, so I thought it would be worth sharing. Mrs. Pellegrini and I, we do this every year. I read you this story. So you'll see that in his piece, he has a lot of similes, which we've talked about, which is really great to incorporate in your writing because it makes it more interesting to the reader, and it creates a lot of visuals in the reader's mind so they can really get a picture of the story you're writing. Also, right now, since you're starting to draft your story today, we want you to start with just the introduction. So maybe it's a paragraph or two. And the introduction includes setting up who the characters are, and it sets up your setting. That's the where and the when that your story takes place. So I want you to pay close attention to that beginning piece. And as we've talked about before, that's called the exposition. So the details I want you to listen to. He uses a lot of adjectives, some sensory adjectives. So it gets you, again, a visual in your head. He incorporated a lot of this. He loved Greek mythology. So you'll hear some Greek mythology or characters that you might find in Greek mythology come out. Also, he set it around a couple of the characters, or maybe it reminds me of Aladdin, the movie Aladdin. And then, of course, in fantasy, which makes it fantasy, it's got to have fantastical elements. And one thing is something magical. So you could have a magic word, and or you can have a magic item, like maybe a magic pen or maybe a magic carpet. And in here, he's going to have something magical. There's also, he referenced this, there's a clip from The Wizard of Oz. He referenced something like, it's like the Wizard of the Cowardly Lion running out the window of in the Wizard of Oz movie. So if you ever seen The Wizard of Oz, it's one of my faves. So let me see. You probably won't see this too well.
She kills us what? I said no!
All right, so that's what he's referencing, one section, and you'll hear that. There's also, you know how Mrs. G, I love music, so, and songs, he references some songs in his story too, because again, you can make your story with a little bit of humor in there and makes it more interesting to the reader. So that's, I think, all I really wanted to tell you at this point. I'm going to also show you how he set up his dialogue, because we'll be doing some mini lessons after the spring vacation about setting up dialogue in a narrative. And your fantasy piece will be a narrative story because we want people to talk. You don't want a lot of talking, but you want to sprinkle it in. So I'll show you how he set it up in the type version. So this is called John and Juliet. So if you think of Romeo and Juliet, that was a Shakespeare's play, you can get a flavor of what this might be about. Okay, so here we go. So again, listen to how he set up the beginning part, the introduction. The island of Orc was famous for its luscious green forest, deep blue ocean, high mountain tops, and vast valleys. On the island, there lived a peasant named John, who had ash black hair and dark blue eyes. In fact, his eyes were so blue, they appeared to be as deep as the sea. When John was 10, his father gave him a majestic robe called a toga for his birthday. It was white and silver, made from the silk of 1,000 spiders. When John put it on, he felt like he had the strength of 100 gladiators. Unfortunately, a year after his 10th birthday, his father left to fight in the Trojan War, and John never saw him again. From that point forward, John wore the toga only on his birthday and the day after his father left for war. On a partly sunny day, John ventured into the marketplace because he needed some money and food. Being a peasant, you had to steal a lot, so this day was no exception. When John approached the market, he looked around to see what he needed. He walked up to the stand where they were selling bright red apples. He said to the vendor, 10 apples, please." "That would be 5 coins, stated the man. With the turn of a head, John grabbed the apples, snatched the money from the man, and then knocked him to the ground. John quickly ran down the street. He turned into an alley and put the apples and money into his sack. Magic sack. This sack was so magical that it could hold about 15 elephants at one time. All of a sudden, when John started to walk on Main Street, guards saw him. John's legs started to quiver and his head started to turn 90 degrees to the left. The vendor from behind the crowd yelled, "I want him, dead or alive." So look, I wanted just to show you. My camera's on backwards, but you can see how he set up the dialogue. Each time somebody talks, it's on a different line. All right, so I want him dead or alive. John started to sprint down the bumpy paved road. As John was going down, 2 guards came out from a side street. John yelled out, "Black hole!" and his sack turned into a dark black hole, which he immediately jumped into. After John jumped into his sack, he was transported to the other side of the island at the edge of a forest and landed with a big thud. He started to walk through the forest, continuing with his stealing peasant behavior. Later that night, when John was about to approach the last house he was going to steal from, he heard a beautiful voice coming from inside a big home. It sounded like a peaceful tone water nymphs make in the morning by a sparkling waterfall. This house turned out to be the emperor's home of the island of Orc. He started to approach the balcony where the voice was coming from. John looked up and found a gorgeous girl with long curly blonde hair, slender body, with the most glowing complexion he'd ever seen. He decided to be silent and stopped by again in the morning wearing his beautiful toga. Maybe she will notice me in the morning and think I'm wealthy and the gods will be in my favor, he wondered. The following day, John sprang out of bed and ran down Main Street wearing his beautiful special toga. As he approached the emperor's house, he saw 2 guards, but they didn't notice him. He knocked on the door. Feeling nervous, he stood like a statue, waiting for someone to answer. Juliet, the beautiful emperor's daughter, with her long curly blonde hair, opened the door. Immediately, their eyes met and they fell in love. Juliet asked, "What can I do for you, sir?" John replied, "My name is John, and I heard your beautiful voice last night. I was wondering if you would like, to walk for a while, if that's okay." Actually, it says to talk for a while, if that's okay. She quickly said, "Of course," with an eager tone. After 2 hours of conversation, the emperor appeared in the room where they were speaking and noticed John. He remembered him as the stealing peasant the guards told him about. The emperor yelled out, "Out of my house before I send you to my dungeon." John got so nervous he jumped out the window like the Cowardly Lion from the Wizard of Oz. The next day, John tried to meet Juliet again. This time, when he approached the emperor's house, the guards saw John and started throwing rocks at him. He started to run back home knowing this plan failed. Uh-oh. Later that week, Juliet received an egg dropped off by a cat. She cracked the egg open, and inside there was a message that read, "Dear Juliet, at midnight tonight, come to the pier, and I'll be waiting for you, my love." That night, under the midnight stars, John waited patiently at the pier for Juliet. Minutes later, he saw a shadow come from behind the tree. It was Juliet. He bursted out in tune. "Isn't she lovely? Isn't she wonderful?" Before they even had time to talk, the emperor came out of the water and said, "Stop right there." The emperor grabbed Juliet's arm and ran off in a rampage. John was frantic and had to come up with a quick plan to get his lady back. He then grabbed for his magic sack he had in his back pocket and threw it in front of the running emperor. John yelled, "Black hole!" and the sack began to spin around like a cyclone. The emperor slowly got sucked into the vortex. John screamed to Juliet's father, "This is the end of you!" Before long, the emperor drowned into the darkness of John's magical sack. Juliet then ran over to John and whispered, "You are my Prince Charming." John broke out into song and dance. "It's a beautiful night. We're looking for something dumb to do. Hey, baby, I think I want to marry you." As John and Juliet started to set off into the dark, shady forest, the magic sack started to vibrate. A voice echoed out of the sack and said, "It's time to plot my revenge. ... To be continued." Wasn't that great? All right, so you're going to start to work on your introduction today. You're setting up the characters and you're setting up especially the setting. Make sure you use a lot of describing words. Have fun. See you next time.